Welcome to the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy and exhausting. Join me, Shána, and the rest of the Twinkle EYFS team as we talk honestly about our experiences as practitioners, teachers and professional nappy changers. Whether you're listening to increase your CPD hours or catching up on our antics whilst driving home from work, Twinkle EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Twinkle Talks EYFS. I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about in today's episode because we have got a special guest coming to join me and have a chat today. But before we get into that, it's time for another round of Only in the EYFS, where you guys get in contact and tell me things that happen in early years that wouldn't really happen anywhere else. Let's have a listen.
This week in Only in the EYFS. We've received reports today from Jen Katz at the local park who's heard a child running around saying, "Yay, we are going home for some cock porn," and watching it on the big TV, with the mother running behind them yelling, "Yes, we'll be having popcorn and watching films on the big TV." Thanks for clarifying, Mum. We've received updates from Eliza, who's heard a 3-year-old girl telling her friendship group that she's just had a really wet fart. The kind of updates we all need. Tell me you work in early years without telling me you work in early years. Rebecca has videoed herself this week brushing her Labrador's teeth for Oral Health Week. That's right, Rebecca, you look after that canine's canines. That's it for this episode. Tune in next time for more antics in Only in the EYFS.
Thank you, Katie, for those hard-hitting news headlines. I mean, move aside, BBC. This is the kind of news that we need to hear about, okay? Wet farts and cleaning dogs' teeth. I mean, what else do you need to know? So, on to our main topic of today's episode. I'm really excited to share with you an interview that took place between me and the amazing Sue Asquith. She is an education consultant and she's come to talk to me today about transition and how we can help as practitioners, but also from a parent's perspective as well. So, without further ado, let's listen to Sue. Okay, so we have got the amazing Sue Asquith with us here today. She is an early years consultant and advisor, and she's here to talk about transition with us. So welcome, Sue. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's a delight to be here with you.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what transition is, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your journey in education and your experience in the early years.
Okay, so that started back in 1998. I became a registered childminder with my local authority, primarily because I wanted to spend more time with my then baby, now 26-year-old, and obviously help to bring him up myself rather than finding the extra money to obviously put him in childcare and obviously having that mum guilt of not being with him as well. And it seemed the ideal thing for me as a single parent needing to pay my mortgage to earn having with me, and carried on from there really. I then did my childcare qualifications or more childcare qualifications, got the training bug, started to work with the local authority on their training packages in the local children's centres, affiliated with them, rolling out training and helping and mentoring new childminders and parents and things. And then I started working on some DFE funded projects with people like PACE, NDNA, ICANN, Communications Trust. I didn't have the funding myself, obviously worked with other people, but kind of doing all that and being on the ECAP project as well, the Every Child a Talker project, and tried really to get involved with anything and everything that was happening in early years so that I could obviously build my skills and experience. Then I became a tutor and an assessor and never looked back since really. So it's a whole big whirlwind, really, I suppose, when you look back. But I've enjoyed every moment of it, really.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that you have the aspects of all different areas of early years. You come at from a parent perspective, from a educator's perspective, and then a tutor and assessor, and developing policies and things like that. It's just, you're very well-rounded, Sue. We are so lucky to have you here.
Thank you.
So we'll start with the big question. So for our listeners who might not know, we are recording this a couple of days after National Admissions Day, which is, of course, a massive time in not only early years children's careers, but parents and teachers. It's a really big change. And so the buzzword, the thing that everyone's talking about at the moment, is transition, which is why we wanted to get you on to share your advice, not just to teachers, but to parents as well, just to help us through that process. So first things first, what does transition actually mean? What does it look like?
So transitions is, if you look up a definition, you'll find something like it's the fluid movement from one thing to another. Obviously, early years transitions could mean lots of things. So when we think about transitions in early years, we often think about a baby moving up to toddler room, or toddlers moving up to preschool, or preschoolers getting ready to start school.
Yeah.
But if we actually think about it, early childhood is full of transitions. Babies moving from milk feeds to weaning, moving from a cot to a bed, from nappies to toilet or potty training, maybe getting a new sibling on board. There's absolutely loads of transitions to get used to throughout the childhood. And if we are helping children with those smaller age and stage appropriate transitions, then we are at a stage where they're not afraid of change. They might be excited or a little bit like, I'm not really sure, but they've had a positive experience. They've been supported, so they have got some resilience already, thinking, well, last time I felt like this, I tried this, or Sue said to try such and such instead, and what have you. So when we think about earlier transitions, there are lots of little things that really help the big things. So if we can get them in place, and obviously work with partnership with parents and also reception class teachers, we can do a lot of good in terms of helping children have a positive outlook to transitions.
I think that's a really good point you make as well, because even me, I fall into this, that when you hear the word transition, you think moving up a year group, moving a room, moving a classroom, but it's actually so much more than that. And especially for young children, where they are surrounded by new experiences all the time, they actually have a lot of transitions. It's just so we don't see it on that same level, do we? But actually, it's really important that we do, not just for us to support them, but like you say, so that the child gets used to the process, so to speak, of the smaller transitions, so that when a big transition like changing room, changing year group, etc., comes along, it's not such a big shock to the system, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And another thing that we've all been through, a massive change, is, of course, the C word, COVID. The past 2 years has been really difficult for all of us, and it's, in a way, its own transition. And I was just wondering, what kind of impact have you seen on children's mental health and well-being during COVID? And have you seen that change or have an impact on transitions as well?
Yes, and I think for some children it's a positive thing, and some of them it's a negative thing, depending on what has happened to them during those 2 years in terms of COVID. Maybe also thinking about, obviously they pick up things from their adults and their environment, so maybe starting to think about the adults and how they've supported the children through changing COVID. Even if you're the most resilient person in the world and you look forward to change and it's not a big deal and you're not really fazed by that, it's the first time that anybody kind of living in this day and age really has obviously come across a pandemic, and it's the fear of the unknown really, isn't it? And some people, I always go back to those first few days, weeks, when everybody went out bulk buying toilet rolls and rice and pasta and anything that they could fill the cupboards with that obviously didn't go out of date particularly. Obviously stockpiling, not really knowing what to expect. And those are all the people possibly in fight and flight mode. Nothing to draw upon, don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to go out and buy anything that will last me, and obviously we'll try and dig in for this and see what happens. Some of those parents and adults have lived through COVID and survived it. Some of them have been thriving through it. So that will obviously depend on the feelings and the experiences that the children are getting, whether the children have stopped maybe at childcare because their adult's a key worker, or whether maybe they spent time at home with their adults. Children, we're finding possibly quite a lot of feedback from nurseries and childminders and preschools now are that children struggle with some transitions because they're not as socialised as maybe they were. So they've missed lots of toddler groups and birthdays and going to play gyms and things like that, which means then that they're not ready, or they haven't got the experience of larger groups, lots of noise, different environments, which all add to the confusion, I suppose, of these children that are ready to go to school, because it's an unknown thing again. And I think it probably just depends really on whether it's a positive or negative experience through COVID and the things they can draw upon at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you're saying that, I was trying to picture when I was a teacher in nursery during COVID, and I remember that first September in 2020 thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be the toughest year ever. These poor children, they for the majority of their life, they have not left the house and they have missed so much. No one's going to want to come to nursery. They're going to be screaming. It's going to be the worst half term ever. And surprisingly, it was the easiest, it was the calmest September transition I have had ever. And I think it really shocked me because I was expecting all of this. I was preparing like this, okay, these children aren't going to have this, so we're going to provide more of this and all of this stuff. But actually, you're right. For some children, it would have actually really benefited them because I mean, there are countries in Europe that do it, don't they? They start school a lot later. They have more time at home. Their early years is spent at home. And they say it's because of a lot of educational benefits and things like that. I feel like, in the UK, we do start our children in formal education quite young compared to the rest of Europe. And actually, for a lot of them, it really suited them. It gave them more time to really kind of understand their own environment, come into their own, kind of that egocentric child kind of thing about understanding who they are, where their place is. And then they were so grounded in that they felt that they were confident enough to go into an outside space. So it really, I think you're so right. It really does depend on, the individual child, the individual experience of the parents as well, and their experience of COVID, because yes, of course, a lot of families really did struggle, absolutely. A lot of us did, but there were some children that actually that extra time at home, that extra family time, because parents had to work from home, or unfortunately, they might have been furloughed or things like that, really horrid things that did happen. For some children, it did mean that they were able to have more family time, and that obviously benefited them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think from going into different nurseries, lots of people are saying about the PSED, they can see the difference, and they can also see the difference with communication and language. But then there are some nurseries that are saying, we don't really see a difference at all now. The children, we're thinking they've caught up, or they're keeping up, and they're not really noticing a difference. But I think if you ask the general question about children, they usually say personal, social, emotional development, making relationships, maybe playing with other children, because they might have obviously had some really nice experiences maybe during lockdown, but they've missed out on that kind of parallel play and that kind of cooperation play, and obviously then that's going to knock onto the creativity. So I always say, and I've said for years, regardless of COVID, we need to see the individual child, meet them where they're at, and then obviously we go from there. If there are any gaps there, any delays there, fair enough, but let's meet them there instead of where chronologically they should be.
Absolutely.
And then we can obviously work our magic and really help the individual children in unique ways.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that's kind of the whole ethos of early years, isn't it? It's that every child is unique, and sometimes we might not slip away from that, but the pressures of data and an assessment, it just kind of strips all of that away. And this notion of school readiness, like what does that really mean? I think I'm going to do another episode on this actually, but we've got this onus on, right, how can we help the children prepare? How can we help the parents prepare? Which of course is important, but actually what are the schools doing to meet the child where they're at? And I think that's really, really important. and something that transition is so useful for, isn't it? It's not just beneficial for the children and the families, but it actually is great for us as educators to be like, right, this is where this cohort is this year. This particular child can do this. This particular child struggles with that. So I'm going to change up my environment. I'm going to change up my teaching style to suit these children. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we forget, and I keep thinking I'm going to re-look into this. I started to look into it at uni years ago, but I only had maybe just a half a week or something to start looking at it. And then I think my library pass ran out and I couldn't get to anything anymore. No. But you know, when you can get all that rich journal stuff in uni, you can really get loads and loads of reading. I started looking into summer loss. I've tried Googling it and looking in various search engines for things, and I can't find as much anymore, but I kind of had everything open and I was really looking forward to getting my teeth into a new piece of research, and then I couldn't follow it up. But they were saying that if children leave childminders, nurseries, preschools at the end of July and they have that summer off, we're saying, oh, your children can do this, and they're confident with doing that, and they're independent in doing the other, that then maybe they lose some of that. I know Ofsted were saying when they came back after lockdown, there was a lot of regression. And we know that through research, that happens also during the summer holidays.
Yes.
And then also, just because they were confident with their key person in their preschool or nursery or childminder and that environment doesn't mean to say they're going to be super confident on day one or week one or month one in terms of that new environment in reception as well. So I think we do these transition reports and we try our best to get that information over, but absolutely it's every teacher wondering what's that unique child all about, obviously reading and having discussions with parents and key people, but then taking that child just as an open book maybe on day one, because they might have regressed or they might not yet feel comfortable to be doing the things that they used to do before. So
that's so important. Yeah, you're so right. And from kind of like your experience in going into nurseries and things, what kind of things have you seen impacting children during transition? What are the big kind of things that you spot?
The uncertainty and the anxiety to begin with, I think. But I think it's really important to remember that children haven't got that first-hand experience. We know what starting school is about. We know what big school is all about and who the teachers might be and things like that. But it's an absolute foreign concept totally for the children. We might as well be saying we've got a rocket ship and we're going to Mars tomorrow, because they've absolutely no idea what that means either. When I was a childminder, I think the children were very lucky in terms of from babies, toddlers, preschoolers, they always did the school runs, and they wanted to be that big boy or girl with their book bag and uniform, and they absolutely couldn't wait to get through that gate on that first day into the early years unit and wanting to go through. But a lot of children obviously hadn't had that experience, and then the playground's a big and frightening place, and obviously there are lots of big boys and girls bustling about and big lines and whistles blowing to line up and things, and it can be a frightening place if they've not got used to it. So I think we forget sometimes that the children don't have those first-hand experiences if they haven't got the siblings at school maybe, and things like just reading the books about what it's like to go to school, making your own books even better. Can you get the school teachers to give you photographs and make books? And some of the teachers are getting back into this year, going back into the nurseries maybe to read stories with the children and getting to know them, which is fantastic. But maybe if they can take a video of their classroom and the outdoor areas, and we're really giving children a first-hand, this is what school's all about.
Yeah, and we know what it's like. We know, we've been through it every year. It's, and the thing is, I think as well, we always say to the younger children, oh, big school, as if we assume that they know what that means. And probably the poor child is like, yeah, big school, what is that? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, we often say that you're going to big school, and they look at you going, maybe. People are saying that word a lot, but I don't really know what that is.
Right, exactly. And I know you touched on a couple of the things, but what guidance would you give to supporting children with that particular transition, that move into a new setting?
I think we can do lots. I mean, obviously it depends, because nurseries are sometimes stuck with the thing that actually children are going to 6 or 7 different schools, but it obviously depends on what's happening for you in your area and how many children are going to various schools. But as you said, we had the admissions emails probably yesterday or the day before, 19th of April, I think they were, weren't they? And we were thinking then about maybe the parents can tell the nursery manager or the key person where they're going, which school they're going to. And then maybe we can start with maybe little cohorts of children that are going to this school, that school, the other school, if there's more than one child, obviously that wouldn't work if there was just one child going somewhere else. But if one group is going to the school with the blue uniform and one's going to the green uniform, maybe then we can start to get bits of uniform, maybe some hand-me-down bits of uniform. Maybe we can take photographs of school. Maybe if we can maybe take children on a walk past school so that they can actually, experience those kind of things. It's trying to give them those kind first-hand experiences to bolt some knowledge onto, really.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the schools have got lovely videos and meet the teacher kind of things on their website, so you can get to that free. Or we can maybe speak to the reception class teachers and staff saying, can we have some photographs so we can make a book about starting school? And the child could maybe then take photographs of nursery and their key person and their mums and dads and families and things. And then there's a focal point. If for that shy child on that first day, they can take that transition book. This is you, but this is me. It's difficult because the teacher can't read 30 of those. But, if we can try and get involved with doing things like that, I think little things make big things, don't they? They just make it a lot easier sometimes.
Yes. I love that idea because I've done this. I make the transition packs for the children and the families, like, these are your teachers, this is their name and their photos, this is the garden, these are these areas. But actually doing it for the child and being like, this is my nursery, this is where I am now, this is my key worker, I think is such a lovely take on it, because like you say, when they come, the unfamiliarity is going to completely throw them. So if they have something that is familiar, that they feel like they can share, I think that's a really, really lovely piece of advice. That's great. And in terms of parents, because I know there'll be a lot of parents that will be listening, do you have any advice for them, supporting them perhaps maybe in the summer to get them ready for that big change?
Yeah, I think from parents' point of view, it's thinking, do I have to adjust my routines at home? So bedtime routine, for example, if they've only gone to nursery for the afternoon session, for example, obviously they're going to have to be up and ready.
Yes.
So maybe adjusting the routines at the start of the summer holidays, if not sooner. Maybe bedtimes need adjusting so that they can get, obviously, a full night's sleep. And then this time, and it's not a rush and chaos on a morning to try and get the breakfast down them and get the uniform on and rush off to school. Maybe then they could talk to the child about how they're going to go to school. Obviously, some parents will go in the car. If you're going to walk, or maybe walk halfway or what have you, maybe do that practice run a few times so the children get to experience that. The parents, it will help parents with timing, because obviously the school run 9 o'clock mayhem takes longer than normal. Maybe things like uniform, getting the children to practice putting the uniform on, because we know as a reception class teacher and a reception class staff, one of the biggest nightmares is PE, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
And all those unnamed shirts and things that fly about and everything getting backwards, and it's just one of those things, isn't it?
I'm literally getting sweaty as you're saying these. This is like bringing back memories.
Yeah, you can. Obviously, labelling your child's uniform, huge. Even if it's only a biro or a Sharpie or something, and writing your child's initials or names and everything. There's loads of things. When my 26-year-old was little, I had the thing of buying those. They were all embroidered, and I had to sit and sew them in, and it took me hours. But there's so many things now. With my other child, I got some I think they were called stickings. And they're absolutely the best thing, because you think that these labels are going to fall off, and absolutely they were brilliant, and they're washed and washed and washed. Yeah. In fact, years later, we'd pass the jumper on to somebody in the childminding world, and years later, it was in lost property, and it came back to us, and I was going, no, that's on ours now, but this label wouldn't come out.
That's brilliant.
But just making sure that obviously all your kit is, and coats and gloves and everything else is,
Right. I was going to say coats is something that everybody misses. And I'm like, no, because there are about 3 or 4 coats that are exactly the same size and the same pattern. You've all gone to the same shop and bought it during the back to school sales, which is great. But now we don't know whose jacket is whose. And also,
and shoes.
We're just on the same page. Shoes! And also putting left and right in the bottom of the shoes, I think is really helpful. Just an L and an R or little arrows facing, because I think that also really helps children to put their shoes on independently as well, not just have their name in. So,
top tip for shoes: if your child has got, if they're like, let's say, trains or something like that, if you've got a label that's quite a large label, if you cut it in half and you put half the training and half the training into the shoe, and then when they put them together, they can see it goes together. Or actually, no, that's the wrong way around. That was a really good one for our our children to get their shoes on the right feet. So, and that worked. It's a really simple idea.
That's a genius idea. Yeah, that's so simple. And it's great because the kids can have their own little sticker. Oh my gosh, that's great. Much more interesting than left and right. And what about our children that maybe are multilingual? Perhaps they've come from a different country, and so their families speak a different language other than English. Or what about our families that have perhaps children with additional education needs? So their transition is obviously going to look a little bit different. What kind of things can we do to support those families and those children?
I think it's working with the schools with this, because obviously some children and some families will need extended transitions. It could be argued that the cohort of children last year, this year, and maybe even next year might need a little bit more than that transition day. And I do get it. Yeah. Teachers have got the things to do from day one. They've got the baseline assessments to do. They've got head teacher pressure maybe on them to get this done and that done. But maybe really thinking about for these children that might need more than that hour transition visit or something. Children with SEND maybe will need some more time to get used to the smells and the sensory side of things. Going on transition day is completely different to going on a day when everybody's there, when the rest of the school's there, when the smell's coming from the kitchen and all sorts of things. And those things are little things maybe to most people, but big things to some children. In terms of additional languages, I think it's similar to what we try and do when we are settling children and parents into childcare, but trying to make sure that anything the schools are giving out on new parents' evenings and things, trying to think, is there any way we can ask the school to see if they can get those translated? Are schools aware that this particular family have got English as additional language and some of the things that they can do? Some of the local authorities are really good at being able to provide translation information, or maybe an interpreter if necessary. Maybe somebody within the school, in terms of the parents that are already there, could do a bit of translating and give them some first-hand experience about what was tricky for them. Knowing that people who have come from different countries will be maybe well versed in what school's like in that different country, but as we've already said, obviously children start school quite early in England compared to everywhere else, and some of the systems might be different as well. So just trying to understand being culturally aware and understand the potential barriers and putting as much in place to mitigate those as possible, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I remember when I was trying to get ready for, like presentation evenings and home visits and things like that, I didn't realise, it was only till someone who was new into the school came and told me that our local council had a service where if you were a school, you could request an interpreter. So you just ring up this number and say, look, I've got this family that's from this country. Do you have someone that speaks this language who can either come on a Zoom call with us and translate as we go, or can actually physically come to the meeting? Because it's really important. And I know, even for families who do speak English, those admission packs are very overwhelming. There is a lot of documentation. If English is not your first language, it's just a whole other ball game. So if you're listening and you do work in a school, ask your head teacher, but also go into your local authority, because I'm sure that there will be an interpreter service of some sort, and they can also go through documents and translate as well, which is amazing. So really useful tool.
Yeah, and I guess from an early years practitioner's point of view, or manager's point of view, the parents will have got established trusting relationships, hopefully, in terms of their earlier setting. So they could bring some of that maybe to the earlier setting and just go, can you help with this form?
Yes.
Because they won't feel as apprehensive about going back to where they feel as though they've got a sense of belonging and they've got those relationships already set up. And if there's any, I sometimes call it EYFS lingo or EYFS-ness that they don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, they will have heard of some of the PSEDs and what have you, probably from their early years people. But if there's any lingo there that they don't understand, then obviously that maybe the key person of the child can maybe help them fill some of that information out as well.
Yeah, really good idea. Yeah, really good. I've kind of already touched on this again, but in terms of not just reception practitioners preparing for their new cohort, but like you say, as current key workers, as current nursery or preschool practitioners, what can we do to support those children and those families that will be moving up that make that transition?
I think this summer term is the biggest thing, isn't it? Now, we maybe know where the children are going. Thinking about that, we talked about school readiness earlier, or you said maybe we do need to do another session on school readiness. But I did put a poll out in one of the Facebook groups about a month ago, because I was writing a course about transitions. And I asked the teachers, can you please do a poll? I did a poll, and I maybe put 5 or 6 different things there, but then add your own at the bottom. What are your top 5 school ready skills? And I can't remember which way around it was now, but one, reading your own, recognising your own name in print, or maybe writing your own name, and phonics. They were 6 people had voted for something and 1 person had voted for the other. But something like 500 and odd teachers are saying being able to separate from their parents and carers, being able to find their own belongings and manage them appropriately, being able to play alongside other children, being able to listen to a story and tell an adult if something's wrong or something hurts, so they're not feeling well. Those were the top, overwhelmingly the top ones. So making sure that obviously children can do that, supporting them with the self-regulation and that emotional literacy for them to be able to talk to teachers, maybe putting on the transition forms about how that child does communicate if they're feeling anxious and cross. Because sometimes it's not the words that come out, is it? Sometimes it's the actual that you can see a child, you can see an adult, can't you? You can see the face in the recognition of the face and what's going on there as well. So just trying to get to know that child. And then things like independent skills, carrying trays, being able to put the uniforms on, things like that, hugely important, I think, in this final term. But I think a lot of people also start to think about transitions just in a summer term. But actually, if we think about independence and everything from babies and toddlers onwards, we're doing those tiny steps all the time into being that as school ready as possible, in air quotes. To think about, building those skills. So we've got confident, communicative children, confident to hopefully start school and do well.
And I think it is a really common misconception, isn't it? Like that. The most important thing that teachers want to see is, a lot of parents that will come into nursery when I'll do a home visit or things like that, I'll say, okay, so tell me about your child. And they'll immediately say they can read their own name. They know the letters of the alphabet. They can count up to 20. And yes, that's great. That's amazing. But actually, the prime areas are prime areas for a reason. We've got the communication and language, the physical development, the motor development, the personal, social and emotional development. These are the things that are not just important for teachers, but it's important for the children, isn't it? And I think it's a very common misconception. And actually, I feel like we've all, especially in terms of the education system, we've really made a shift onto actually the holistic child and actually their neurological and physical development first before we even go into academics. So I think it'll be nice for practitioners to really dispel that myth for parents and put them at ease and be like, don't worry if they can't spell the alphabet. It's really not a problem. There are other things that should be worked on before that.
Yeah, and sometimes really, if the parents have been showing them their ABCs or what have you, and we're actually been doing ABCs in capitals and things like that, that's obviously contrary to what they're going to be learning in school. And that sometimes is worse, because then the teacher's got to start again with the purest sounds and the lowercase.
Absolutely.
And obviously parents do it with all the best guidance in the world, thinking that's going to make their child smarter, and it's good. But then if you've got to relearn, it's more difficult for the child, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So, lots of little things that we could maybe dispel along the way and really help parents to focus on the getting dressed, being ready, having your routines, being confident, kind of thing. And parents as well, I don't think we've spoken about it yet, but that kind of the child being confident to leave their parent. If parents had a negative experience of school themselves and they're not thrilled about the child starting school and the anxieties are passing on to the child, then maybe that's a whole host of other things, isn't it? So maybe we need to speak to parents about anything that they might be worried about, any information that they might need, because again, the whole host of how the children's going to react will be very similar in terms of what information and what vibes they're getting from their parents as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's always really easy to miss the parents in this, isn't it? It's our focus is on the child and making sure their transition's okay. But actually, what about the parents? For some of them, this might be their first child going into this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, there might be other families that have come from a different country and it's a completely new education system and they have no idea what's happening, and they're gonna need support through their own transition in that as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
With all of this, my question now is for teachers, especially for the reception teachers.
Okay.
It's a lot. This time of year, I know, I always remember coming back from Easter holidays, I'm like, right, the work begins. The work really, gets into gear now. I've got my class right here that I'm going to prepare this whole summer term. We're going to get ready for year one. But then also, hang on a minute, my current cohort, I've just got the list of my new cohort. I've got 60 kids in my head. I'm not really sure where to go. How do we, as educators, balance supporting our current children already, but also preparing for that next cohort?
I know. You need to clone yourself is all I'm saying. I don't know. It's really tricky, isn't it? Really tricky. I don't think I have any one-size-fits-all solutions to that. It's really, really tricky. Obviously, you've got to do both, haven't you? And it's really difficult to have 60 people in mind, especially when you might not have met those new people yet, those new little children coming through as well.
Yeah.
And then depending on your local authority, sometimes the funding agreements mean that all early years providers that are with funded children have to do transitions. And then if you think about all these files that you might be getting from various places, and one nursery might do it differently to another, and the preschool might do it differently, and then the childminder might do it differently again. It's a huge minefield, and I know from the past experience that teachers haven't necessarily had the time to read properly what we've said about the children. And then with the children that are struggling with their regulation and their behaviour, or to manage their own behaviour, and they are a little bit anxious or frustrated about the world, and they come out ashen after a couple of weeks when that child's just kind of showing the true colours. And then you think, well, if you'd have just read what was there to begin with, I would have given you a whole host of information, but maybe they don't have time to, and I absolutely realise that, and it's really tricky to do that. But trying to find out as much as possible about those new starters, so you can meet them from where they're coming from on day one. But how you do that when you've also, obviously, you've got your own children. That one transition day, it would be wonderful if you had a Harry Potter or a Hermione Granger stop the clock thing, wouldn't it? So that you could...
Oh, yeah, the little time turner.
Yeah, so the children could spend more time wherever they go, and you've got more time to spend with the children that are coming up. But it's not going to work, is it? And I do understand. I mean, it's easy for me to say the teachers need to do this and this, but obviously the teachers have got loads of things to do. And like you say, you've got to split yourself in half almost and try to help the children transition into year one, and obviously do your own reports with your internal reports with your key stage 1 teachers,
early years profiles, and
then the profiling, and then obviously start to think about the transitions and visiting the schools or visiting the nurseries and doing your story times and trying to get as much possible those relationships started with those children as well. I don't know is the answer to that one. It's a huge thing, isn't it? It's really difficult.
It's massive, isn't it? But I think as well, it's just through listening and talking, it's also that it's a massive transition for us, and all of this stuff that we're preaching to our children, to our parents, to our colleagues. Actually, we should understand that it's a transition for us as well. What do we need to ensure that this transition is actually working for us as well? And community makes such a big difference, I think. If you have those relationships with the preschools that are in your area, so that you're more than likely to get children from those preschools, childminders that I've had throughout the years, they'll always come back because they'll be childminding a new set of children in that age group. And it's really about, I suppose, just reaching out and like you say, making those connections and not relying on, but also using those reports from the nurseries, from the childminders, from the preschools. Like, it is there to help us. And sometimes, like you say, we're not always going to get the time to read them all, which is a real shame. But then you've got the home visits. The parents know their children inside out, and it's just being like, for that first half term, it's okay. I feel like there's a lot of pressure in that first half term, isn't it, to really get cracking. But actually, from personal experience, I feel the more relaxed, the more free that first half term is, the more it's more, okay, let's just see how the children react to this space first before we're like, right, we're going to learn about space. Right, I feel like you're getting on the back foot by doing that. But there is a lot of pressure from schools, isn't there? Yeah, from top down, definitely. And right, you need to have a curriculum, you need to have a plan, you need to have evidence of this, etc. But actually settling in takes, I would say, at least one half term for all children in a school setting. So maybe it's having those conversations with SLT as well and saying like, look, this is early years. It's very different from going into year 2, going from year 3 to year 4. It's not the same, and this is what we need, and maybe just having that open conversation as well.
Yeah, it is tricky though when you read the guidance from the phonics programs and the early writing programs, because it's like, from the day one, morning one, the first sound gets rolled out, and actually you do, like you say, and it's just that, let's take a breath of fresh air, everybody, the DFE, everybody, SLT, head teachers, this is what we need to do with these children in the first 6 weeks now more than ever, maybe, but it could be argued that obviously forever in the past has also been a thing as well. It's really important to get the PSED right, and if that is right, then obviously we'll grow. It's the foundation, it's like the roots of the flower, isn't it? If we want the children to flower by the end of the early learning goals and by the end of reception, then we need to concentrate on the seed, watering it, making sure the roots are there, etc.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, there's baseline assessments and things they've got to do as well. And obviously, there's just pressure, isn't it? Pressure.
It is a lot of pressure, yeah. But hopefully a couple of those things will help each other, which would be quite nice. But we've actually got a couple of questions from listeners. So we did a little reach out on social media a couple of weeks ago to say, hey, we've got this amazing person called Sue coming, talking all about transition. What do you want to know? And we've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
So I think this is coming from a reception teacher's perspective. We've got a lady called Laura. She says, what kind of key information should we as reception teachers share with year 1 teachers?
Okay, so that's obviously transition into year 1. So I would be saying it's important to obviously share your EYFSP or some data from it. Who are achieving, who are not achieving, what are the targets for each child, what are each child's learning styles like. So with my youngest child, for example, if you were friendly, we know teachers aren't their children's friends, but if they are friendly and you acknowledged how helpful he wanted to be and his little personality, he would do anything for you, and he would learn and grow, and he would do, he really takes on board. If he had a negative experience early on, like you forgot his name, even just something really simple, it would, his heart would be on the floor, and if his heart wasn't happy, then the child wasn't happy. And I think it's obviously that way for a lot of children. So just imparting as much as possible in terms of their interests, their likes, their strengths, how to make those relationships, or how they feel that child has made their relationship with them. Sometimes in year 1, well, I suppose sometimes in reception, there are job shares maybe, so obviously making sure that you're on the same page there. Year 1 teachers, from my past, there was a job share, and one of them would say, go put your work in the finished tray, and then one of them calls it a finished box. But the one wouldn't change to box because it wasn't a box, it was tray. And the other ones always said box, so she wasn't. And it was confusing for the children.
Yeah.
So obviously that consistency where there are job shares as well. But I think interests and personalities and those characteristics and how they learn is a really useful thing. And if year 1 is less play-based, which usually is the case, I mean, I know sometimes they do try and play out with the early years unit or have some of those kind of links in with the early years unit. But if year 1 is more of a formal thing, then obviously maybe need to think about children's sensory awareness and are they physically ready to sit and hold a pen and sit at a desk all day or most of the day and what have you, and really try and work on some of those skills as well, maybe.
Yeah, that's really good. I think this one is from a parent. So she's called Ellen, and she says, my child didn't get their first choice of school, so what do we do now? I'm sure a lot of parents may be asking this question.
Yeah, really tricky. Obviously, schools have only got a certain amount of places, and sometimes if you have got an older child that goes there, and obviously you need to be in the catchment, and then those are the kind of criteria span out from there, really.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got your first choice of school, then you can appeal. But obviously, you may not win your appeal. I helped a child or a parent win their appeal when I was a childminder, because they lived in a different town to I did. So I live in a village, they lived in the nearest town, and they wanted to go to the village school, and they didn't get in because of their child's home postcode. But when we looked at the fact that she'd spent from 3 months to 4.5 years, she's spent all the time in my village, or most of it, 40 odd hours a week, making friends, going to toddler groups with that cohort of children and what have you. And there was a massive spiel that I could obviously back up the appeal with. So if you're going to appeal, you need to not just think from the heart, but think from the head. Yes, you're heartbroken that you've not got that school, but actually, can you back it up, the reasons why you think it would be helpful for that child to go there? Difficult, because like I say, everybody might appeal, and then obviously they might have a space or 2 spaces or no spaces. So what are they going to do about that?
And Lucy kind of says the similar thing. She actually tells us about one of her experiences, actually. She says, it was a long time ago now, but we had a nightmare, or at least it felt like one at the time, with our oldest when she didn't get any of our selected choices for primary. As a parent, the questions that I mainly wanted to ask at the time were, is the decision final? What should I do next? Who do I even contact for advice? What are my options? How do I apply for an appeal? What is the process like? There's so many different things that I feel like maybe parents don't get knowledge to. And she says here, she understands that different councils would, potentially have varying criteria, but, are there places that she can go to ask these sorts of questions?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that one, but you obviously can go to the admissions telephone number, helpline, or what have you, that information's come from. Do they have any extra bits of information? Parents sometimes don't understand or don't realise that they don't have to go to school into reception class straight away. They can decelerate or defer their child's start. So maybe if they wanted for their child to spend their reception year with their childminder in their preschool, in their nursery, that is an option if they want to do. And they can start in year 1. Or for the younger summer-born children, you can actually just spend a year sometimes in nursery, preschool, or with your childminder, and start in reception the next year.
Yeah.
And then there's the option sometimes of homeschooling as well. Sometimes there are maybe a private school, you could look into that, because sometimes the fees are extortionate, but sometimes they're not, and sometimes you can get a scholarship, and sometimes there's funding available for children to go to different schools as well. So I'm not aware in our area of a kind of ring so and they help you, but just being more informed and maybe reading more about what is available in your local authority. At the end of the day, anybody can request for a deceleration or a deferral of school, but it's down to the local authority whether they'll let you skip that year and go into year 1, or whether you can spend time in the earlier setting and go into reception the next year.
Oh, interesting.
So it's up to them to make that decision, but anybody can ask for that. So and that might be helpful maybe from some of the children, from the parents. They're coming from different countries where they think that obviously maybe in their country the children might not start till 6 or 7 in school, so maybe that might suit actually some parents as well.
Yeah, that's really good. I think I've heard as well that there are some early years and nursery settings that offer a reception year as well, which is actually quite exciting. So yeah, maybe like you say, be informed, ask, don't be afraid to ask, I think is the main thing, isn't it? Go and have a look for yourself, look at what your rights are, what you can do, and speak to the schools and like you say, the authorities as well. They'll have information, which is great.
I think it's really exciting in some of the international schools that I've been working with, that they do maybe they might not have the tiny babies maybe in the international schools, but from toddlers through, but then they keep the reception and sometimes even year 1 in the same international school stroke kindergarten, and then they go off into the more formal schools. And again, the progress that they make, because it's a play-based approach all the way through reception, seamless into year one, is again, it's a huge thing. So even where they're going international schools to quite a what I'd probably call a chalk and talk kind of regime, when they go into big school, because they've spent more time in that play-based approach, they're more resilient, the better problem solvers, they're more able to go into that more formal way of working as well. So that's really interesting and exciting, and maybe something we should look into in the UK as well, maybe.
Oh yeah, I know, drop hints there. We'll get in touch with Bojo right now. It's just been so good talking to you. I could honestly talk to you all day. We're going to end with kind of like a little fun quiz that I kind of do with all my guests. Okay. A little token that we do. It's a Would You Rather teacher edition. Okay, so we've got some hard-hitting questions here, Sue. I hope you're ready for this. All right.
Absolutely.
Would you rather tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Oh.
However, if it's really, really awful cheap coffee and you don't have some proper milk, I'd rather go herbal tea. I don't drink tea as in the traditional tea with milk, and I don't like traditional tea. But if you've got a flavoured, I don't know, a raspberry or a strawberry or something, I would probably go that over cheap coffee and horrible long life milk, because that's really like, no, it's not nice, is it? But usually coffee. I'm a bit of a caffeine freak, so usually coffee.
Only the good stuff. And we kind of need it in early years, don't we? It keeps us going.
We do.
Question number 2. Would you rather run out of whiteboard pens or highlighters?
With my early years hat on, I'd say highlighters, because I do like a good whiteboard marker. However, if as a student, I'd definitely say I'd rather run out of whiteboard markers. So it depends which hat I've got on, I think, because I do like both.
Yeah.
If you'd have asked me about flip charts and whiteboards, I might have said flip chart was the one I'd rather run out of, because you can do both with the whiteboard markers, can't you? But
well, that's a good point. See, I love a good flip chart. I don't know why. I prefer a flip chart to a whiteboard. So it's interesting that you said. I'm going to add that on to one of my questions for another guest. We're going to put it to other people. Is it going to be whiteboards or flip charts? That's a good one.
Because flip chart, if you try and write on a whiteboard, which I'm sure you've already tried to do, because most of us have, with the wrong one, doesn't come off, does it?
Yeah. Oh, I've got a trick for that.
Go over it.
So if you go over it, and then it comes off with a white. I was like, oh my God, I've missed this trick my entire career. I found it on the last year I was teaching. I was like, I should have used this for 9 years.
Yeah. But you can't do it the other way around. So I think that's probably a top tip, isn't it?
Oh, that is a very good top tip and very important for that decision. I'll keep that in mind. And question number 3, final one.
Okay.
Would you rather do a whole school assembly or run a whole school staff meeting?
Interesting. I don't think I'd mind, to be honest. I'd probably go with the assembly, because obviously the children will be at the assembly, and I'm usually quite good at speaking with the children.
Yeah.
But depending on the topic, maybe, of the whole staff, I could maybe give them all lots of things about safeguarding or communication with children, or how to, in air quotes, manage children's behaviour in terms of their self-regulation skills and things. So it would depend. But I think just as holistic, jump one way, I'd probably go with the assembly.
Yeah, I think I would as well. Kids are great, and they're such a good audience, because you can crack a joke and be silly, and it's the best assembly ever. You try and do that in a staff meeting. It doesn't get the same response, funnily enough. I don't know why. It's been great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming. I just kind of wanted to end with a little word from you. It just kind of summarise everything that we've talked about today. What is the one thing that you would love our listeners to take away with from today?
I think partnership working and seeing the transitions from all angles, from the early years practitioners' angles of saying goodbye to those children, and obviously the children saying goodbye and moving on, parents and teachers, and working in holistic partnership and trying to do the best. Like you say, it's we can't be all to everybody, but just trying to see the barriers and the anxieties maybe from everybody's angles and be more informed, so we can do as much as possible working in partnership with everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sue. If people want to contact you and find out more, where can we find you?
Facebook is probably the easiest. I've got a Facebook group that people can join. It's just under my name, so Sue Asquith, Early Childhood Consultant. I've got a website under the same name, so you can find me there. I am on LinkedIn and Twitter, but I don't do a great deal on those things. But you can obviously message me through those portals if you like, and you will find me on there as well. You can do a contact me through my website, and obviously that will come through in terms of an email if anybody's got any questions, and I'm happy to take them through yourself or obviously through any of those messaging systems.
Amazing. What I'll do as well is I'll put all of the links in the episode description so that people can easily access ways to communicate with you. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
I've really learned so much, but I've also had a really good time. And I really do think our listeners are really going to benefit from this. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That is the end of our episode all about transition with the wonderful Sue Asquith. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed talking to her. It was really great to get someone's perspective who had come from being a parent, a childminder, an educator, and also assessor as well. So she had lots to share. I hope it resonated with you. Get in touch. Let us know what you think. And share this podcast episode with your friends. Share it on Facebook, Instagram. We're on the usual podcast sites. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So that's it from today's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to get involved or would like to know more, come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and TikTok account. All of the details will be in the description. And whatever you're doing, I hope you have a great day today.